Folks, this is Fergus Hodgson, managing editor of the Impunity Observer. Thanks for tuning in to our live stream. This is Observing Impunity, and I'm going to be speaking with our editor at large, Steve Hecht. Now, his screen has just gone black, so I'm not sure why that is, but I hope he's still with us.
And Fergus, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, we'll have him resolve that, but I'll just mention the topic today. We're going to explore the motivations behind the Biden rhetoric. What we mean is that in recent times, this is not a secret, or our listeners will know that he has referred to, quote, MAGA Republicans as a threat to democracy. And so Steve has written 3 articles related to this. One is Biden's lawlessness is the real threat to democracy. So a direct response that actually breaking the law is a threat, not people supporting Make America Great Again. And then the 2 others are anti-MAGA rhetoric as dictatorial deflection. So it's a tactic to hide one's own dictatorial ambitions. Now, please let Steve back in if you don't mind, Mulder. Great. Okay, and then the last one is State Department corruption matches Justice Department corruption. This refers to the problem that if the U.S. is flagrantly violating the rule of law at home, the nation hardly has a leg to stand on when going to countries like Guatemala, where Steve is, to supposedly go into anti-corruption measures. So, Steve, I'm glad we got you back on. You look great, mate.
Okay.
Now, we have a few planned topics within this. So basically, this famous Philadelphia speech where these claims came from, what are the implications, right? Why is this such a meaningful speech? I have a hard time. I find it torturous listening to these speeches. But why is this so meaningful and what does it merit a response?
The speech was a typical Biden speech, and it's part of his polarization agenda, and that Biden has to. The people who manage him, that's the real case. They must divide people. They must create hate and fear. You fear the enemy, you hate the enemy, and that keeps you from paying attention to what the people you support do. So Biden supporters hate MAGA people, hate Trump people, hate the enemy, and they will give a pass to Biden and his partners for their totalitarianism. They violate the law continuously. They politicize justice. They protect their friends, their allies from criminal prosecution. They invent criminal prosecution for their enemies. So this all plays into the same thing. And so the idea that Biden is uniter, which he likes to say, this is complete garbage. This is a typical Marxist, totalitarian strategy to divide and conquer. And that's really the bottom line of what Biden has done.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you that these, and we should, as you would rightly point out, that you, even in your article, this one on Biden's lawlessness, you mentioned that it's his managers, right? We don't assume this guy is some mastermind crafting all these plans, that there's a whole team at work here. But this extremely partisan or hyper-partisan rhetoric is so firm in demonizing the opposition and deflecting from what's going on, or like you say, the real agenda. So what is the real agenda then? What is the Biden regime trying to deflect from?
Well, their totalitarianism. I mean, the Biden regime has, you could see in everything they say and everything they do, that they're trying to silence their opposition, marginalize their opposition. I mean, they want to criminalize. They're trying to criminalize saying that Biden didn't win in 2020. Well, if you look, no Republicans were saying, shut up, let's shut up the Democrats after they said that Trump was illegitimate, they let him talk because it's freedom of speech. But what that shows you is Democrats don't believe in freedom of speech. This is totalitarianism. So they want to distract from their totalitarianism. Totalitarianism is a lie. The whole thing is a lie. And if people don't wake up to that lie in time, it's going to be too late. And even Democrats have to understand that they're going to lose their liberty along with the rest of us.
Yeah, so there's plenty to say about that. And as someone who is an immigrant in the United States, I'm acutely aware of or sensitive to the precious liberties that are American in nature. So the First Amendment, which is free speech, which includes free speech, and the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. These are those very precious freedoms that protect the American Republic. And as you say, these unfortunately have become partisan issues in recent decades. And now it's clear that, I hate to say it, but some politicians are dead against them. So in terms of those who have this totalitarian or socialist inclination, how far have they co-opted the U.S. federal or just the U.S. government? What institutions are most infiltrated, or all of them? Are there any that are not?
Well, yeah, for the most part, they are. I mean, the education from kindergarten through graduate school, for the most part, has been corrupted, co-opted. Marxist professors have tenure. The teachers union has gone Marxist, and they're teaching young children Marxist conflict. They're trying to make people feel guilty about who they are and create conflict among young people. It's really it's a sad thing, and the federal bureaucracy, of course, is completely penetrated. Now, that's not ideological. The bureaucrats like to have more power, and the more power they have, the happier they are. And so they fear Republicans, that maybe Republicans will do what they've said they would do, which hopefully that will start to happen. But the the Justice Department is the greatest example, which is what I wrote about. The State Department is another perfect example. They do whatever they want to do. They don't care about law. They're totally corrupt. So is the Justice Department. And even under Trump, the Justice Department and the State Department were undermining him. So the United States has to correct that if they would like to return to the constitutional principles that the United States is based on. The only organization that I see that is somewhat professional is Treasury Department. You know, the State Department got ankle sanctions on Guatemalans and others. And the reason that they don't have Magnitsky sanctions is that requires Treasury to weigh in. And the Treasury people appear to be more professional than other parts of the government. I hope that stays. I hope that's correct.
Okay. Yeah. And you see there that you can follow Steve Hecht on Twitter at shecht6. And please, if you want to get more detail and follow Steve's articles, go to impunityobserver.com. We have a plethora of content on many different platforms and streams, and I particularly like the Telegram stream. Okay, now we obviously are coming up to midterm elections in the United States, and typically these are, let's say, a round of accountability for the incumbent president. Will this be that and more? What results do you foresee?
I believe you're correct about that. I expect a significant Republican victory. Now, the establishment, I hear from a lot of people, the establishment tries to create the image that it's a tight election. Lunatics like Michael Moore saying Democrats are going to roll. But when you watch real professional commentators, even Democrats, they hedge their position. This is really a question of the Biden regime is accustomed to lying because it has corporate media partners that that spread their lies and suppress truth. So they're not held to any kind of standard. So they believe that they could tell any lie they want. And what they're really saying to the American public is, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? But in this case, they can't hide the inflation. People know that. People have children. They know their children are getting taught to hate everybody else, to feel bad about themselves, that white people are oppressors and minorities are victims. And this is absolutely the wrong thing to teach children. Parents don't like that. We see what happened in Virginia with Glenn Youngkin. He won on this issue. I expect that people have been affected directly by the totalitarian policies, the harmful, destructive policies of the Biden regime. And I expect that people will not pay too much attention. Plus the fact that they're not going to tell pollsters, because of all the polarization and cancellation of dissenters, people don't want to admit it. So they're not going to tell the truth to pollsters. But in the voting booth, there's nobody else there. And I think they're going to tell the truth, and Republicans are going to have a big victory.
Yeah, that's you mentioned it at the outset, the big challenge we deal with, and that is this whole dinosaur or regime media that is just covering for the incumbents right now, that does not want to give a broader reflection of the news, and we almost live in different spheres of information. That's why I'm proud of the work that Impunity Observer does, that Steve's perspective is so crucial. He will tell you it's just a very different perspective that is not being heard enough. Now, given the fact that there is likely to be a major outcome in the midterm elections against the Democratic Party, how is this going to actually change, let's say, the trajectory or the tactics of the Biden regime?
Well, they are professional manipulators. I don't mean Joe Biden. I mean the people who manage him, the people who put him there. To put a cognitively challenged person in the White House without campaigning is a real feat. And these are very professional people, not to be underestimated. So they can see the writing on the wall. They know that they're going to lose. So they're setting things up for the future. And they want to survive Republican Congresses and administration. And they need their polarization to be able to do that. And so if the Republicans do win, as I expect they will, and have a good governing majority, then the Democrats, the Biden regime managers, are going to have to blame everything that happens, everything, on the Republicans, and they're counting on their media. So what's really important is for more people to understand and recognize that those media are partners with Democrats. Their owners are making fortunes in China. That's why they got rid of Trump. They don't want a reciprocal China policy. They want to favor China because they make more money, and they don't care how much money they lose or maybe less money they make with their media partners. So this is one of the biggest things our public needs to be educated, needs leaders who can point this out and explain how it happened. We must understand how we came to this point if we are going to get out from under the thumb of this Democrat Party totalitarianism.
Yeah, again, so much to say there, Steve. And I want to share with the audience that I'm so proud that I get to work with Steve. He and I work closely on these articles. And the latest one that is particularly important that just came out, I'm trying to think now, maybe late last week, was on how the State Department corruption matches Justice Department corruption. So we all know about the Justice Department of the United States that's gotten so much coverage, but Steve is familiar with the way that is basically mirrored abroad. So let's say the deteriorating rule of law in the United States, what are the implications for Guatemala and the rest of Central America?
Well, it happened first in Guatemala and other places in Latin America, and then they spread it to the United States. I mean, I wrote about it in Impunity Observer and the Daily Caller and various other places uh, 5-6 years ago, that I saw what the Obama Biden administration was doing in Guatemala, which was imposing the successors of the Fidel Castro's in Puerto Guerrilla. They took over the justice system, and there it's much worse. If Americans don't watch out, it's going to be like it was in Guatemala. And the Justice Department today is so corrupt. You can see it in what they're doing to Trump, and you can see it in how they're protecting Hunter Biden, Hillary Clinton, and other regime allies and partners. And this is the hallmark of totalitarianism. And it is now being practiced in the United States. Americans don't like to hear it, and they don't like to consider it. They don't like to believe it. I know plenty of people that think that this, come on, stop with this. But if you look at what they do, you can't, you have to purposely deny it to not see that it's totalitarianism. And I think that it's really dangerous, and America needs to wake up, and we need really good leaders who understand what they're going to have to do to restore American exceptionalism, which is based on individualism and God-given rights.
Yeah, Steve, there is a lot going on in Guatemala, and you've been talking about this for almost a decade now. It seems like time has flown by. The way that this politicized justice has already been exercised abroad, and it is, let's say, it has demonstrated what is coming to the United States. And I feel like we're just watching history right before our eyes in the deterioration of the republic. Each day we see these raids on people, or this attack on the My Pillow gentleman. I can't remember his name right now, but all these silly, which are nakedly political, these crackdowns. And often I think that there's a great temptation to stoop to that level. Do you want to talk about why that is a bad idea? Of let's say opposing politicians get into power and want to bring vengeance. Why is that a bad idea?
Well, I wrote about that in one of my previous BizPac Review articles, and I said that we can't afford to have that, because that's what they want to provoke. They want Republicans, the Biden regime managers, want Republicans, when they get into power, to do exactly the same thing that Democrats do: discard the law, persecute political enemies, protect corruption, because that way they feel like they're the ones who have the power to eventually win the fight. Now, it does no good to try to save a republic that's exceptional based on God-given rights that precede government if you're going to violate those rights. In other words, we have to accept that there are restraints on us. We have to work on democratic principles. We can't do what they do. And I believe that we can beat them and restore liberty within the rules of democracy. But to do that, we need the public to understand what they've been up against. We need leaders who can identify this totalitarian movement, and we need more people to understand why it happened and what we have to do to get rid of it. But we must stay within the principles of individualism, the rule of law, due process, presumption of innocence, because otherwise we're going to become just like the totalitarian Democrats, and then the country's not worth saving. If we have to choose between, and this is what they want us to think, if we have to choose between which awful system is going to govern us, then we've lost. We need to win for the Democratic Republic.
Right. So in your second article, and we'll have all these posted, or they already are posted on impunityobserver.com. Please go there if you want to get Steve's full perspectives. The one that I'm looking at right now is Anti-MAGA Rhetoric as Dictatorial Deflection. And you found an interesting statistic here. There's been polling done of U.S. adults or American adults, and about 2/5 across the board, or bipartisan 2/5, believe the U.S. will cease to be a democracy in the next decade, right? So very in short order. And I guess they just disagree that Republicans were saying we're going to a communist dictatorship, Democrats saying we're going to a fascist dictatorship. Why is this? I mean, one, do you believe they're right about the ending of democracy? And two, how is this fascist communist dictatorship, let's say, supposed comparison problematic?
Well, first of all, the Democrats are fascists. I mean, like they're accusing the new prime minister of Italy of being a fascist. But fascism is centralized control. And private property exists in fascism, but the government controls everything. Well, since the communists abandoned state ownership of the means of production, they are identical to fascists. It's the same thing. It's totalitarianism, any way you want to define it. And this is what I was talking about in the previous answer to your question, that there is no difference. We have to understand the principles of a democratic republic: rule of law, presumption of innocence, individual rights. That is what fascism and communism, which, as I said, are identical, that's what they don't do. And so it's very important to understand that this entire rhetoric that the Biden regime uses is exactly that. They want to destroy freedom, even if they lose, even if it's not them in power. They think that they'll come back to power, and they hate the United States. They hate capitalism. So anything that weakens it and destroys it is good, which is how you can explain their foreign policy in China, Iran, Russia, and every other place. So we're fighting people that hate our system, and it's inside our system. They're not outside enemies. They're helping our outside enemies, but they're inside our system, and they're trying to weaken it. They're trying to overthrow it. They're trying to turn it into a totalitarian state. And this is what we must oppose.
Yeah, that is the challenge. That the truth is the greatest enemies of America seem to be in America, and not only in America, but heavily concentrated in Washington, D.C. Now, Steve, you've always got a few topics cooking, right? A few items in the pipeline. Do you want to give people the latest on what's going on the ground in Guatemala in what you are considering writing about in the coming weeks?
Well, one of the things that I plan on writing about is that Biden is now blaming the immigration crisis on Cuban, Venezuelan, and Nicaraguan refugees. Now, those are countries that actually do produce refugees, whereas he says that refugees come from Central America and Mexico, which is not true because there's no persecution there. So asylum doesn't apply to those people. So he's claiming that he can't send those Cubans, Venezuelans, and Nicaraguans back to their countries, that they won't even take them. But how are they getting to the United States? Okay, maybe the Cubans come through Mexico, but some of the Cubans, and the Venezuelans and the Nicaraguans, they come through Central America. They got to pass through Guatemala. The Guatemalan government is doing everything it can to fight the flow of illegal migrants and drugs, and it gets no help. Its president was interviewed recently on U.S. TV when he went to the UN, and he said, "We get no money, we get no cooperation." So the U.S. government has an ally in Guatemala, and Guatemala is the key to the route of a land route to the United States. And the United States is not interested. And the reason is very simple. They want the migrants to come. They are purposely flooding the country, and they're lying. And their media partners are covering for them. And people are letting them get away with it. Now, I believe that voters are going to hold them responsible, because I think voters understand it. And Hispanics especially, they don't like the cultural Marxism, but they also don't like the competition from all these low-priced refugees or economic migrants. So I think you're going to see a big shift in Hispanic voting.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that one up because I had made a note about it before we began the live stream today that the number of illegals coming into the United States since Biden took office, so in less than 2 years, is about 5 million. It is an enormous flow. As far as I can tell, unprecedented and obviously vastly more than anything under the Trump tenure. Now, you made an interesting point on one of your recent radio interviews about the way the open border approach is haphazard or almost vengeful because yes, the current administration or regime is letting people in, but it's letting them in through a back door or a non-transparent manner or opaque manner. What we mean is that you could just give them work visas and let them come, but instead you're just bringing them in all illegally, which is a direct confrontation with the rule of law. So it's almost like a deliberate attempt to undermine any kind of respect for the rule of law in the United States and to create chaos. Do you want to comment on why the Biden regime doesn't want to really address it and just wants chaos? It seems it's confusing.
Well, you're exactly right that that's what they want. It's purpose and purposeful, and that is a typical totalitarian tactic. And if you look back to the election in 2020, the Biden team was presenting Biden as a return to normalcy. I wrote in BizPac Review, you can look it up. As I recall, the date was July 6th, 2020. And I said, that is false. And that if Biden becomes president of the United States, you're going to see a flood of immigrants, and you're going to see an increase in violence in American cities. Well, both have happened. And this is part of their plan. And I knew that from watching them in Guatemala and from studying this for half a century. And it's not surprising. And if people pay attention, they can see the threads and understand why this is happening. So that as long as people don't hold the Democrats, totalitarians, responsible for the violence, it will keep happening. They have to vote those people out. They have to understand these people are purposely promoting polarization, violence, and chaos because that's the precursor to a strong central government taking over. And that's the most dangerous thing that can happen to any society. And they're trying to pull it on the freest society on the face of the earth, the only one that's ever codified natural rights and God-given rights that precede government. And right now, the United States has to return to its roots, has to understand the assault on it, the totalitarian assault, and it has to repel it because that's exactly what they're doing to us.
Gosh, Steve, we're running out of time. It made me think, though, do you believe that an amnesty is the end game? Because often I see socialists as basically offering solutions in search of a problem. So they almost need to create a problem to justify their solutions. And I guess their desired solution maybe is just a blanket amnesty.
Amnesty for what? For themselves?
No, for all these illegals that just giving them residency.
Oh, I don't think they care. I don't think they look that far in advance. I think they're very able. They're they're able to adjust on the fly, and they will. And so they might push amnesty if they think that that's politically good for them, but they might not. They might prefer to have a new administration expel all these people. I don't know if that's even possible. I mean, they've created an impossible situation. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to create something that cannot be undone.
There seems to be almost a willingness to just accept or embrace this limbo of having tens of millions of people with no legal status permanently. And like I said,
Sure.
that is, yeah. Okay, folks. We've rushed through the half hour. There's plenty to say, but I really appreciate you listening, reading our work. TheImpunityObserver.com is our website. Steve Hecht is our editor at large. Please come back next month. Stay tuned to our social media. Get on our email list. Get on our Telegram, Twitter, and we look forward to having you back. Steve, I'm so glad you got to chat this morning, and I look forward to the next article we can work on together.
Thanks very much, Fergus. I look forward to it as well.
Beautiful.